Welcome everyone to Flavor Summit, a global plant forward, translating plant forward menu strategies from limited to full service. As a reminder, you can engage with our presenters by putting your comments or questions in the chat bar, or you can put them in the Q&A tab. And now it's my pleasure to bring on our moderator, Brad Nelson, Vice President, Global Food and Beverage of Marriott International. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you, Patty. It's thrilling to be here with this group. Again, I think, as I said in an earlier call, I wish we were not virtual. I wish we were all back together, but that time will come. I think, as we go through this, I'm excited about this topic. I'm excited about the fellow panelists here. This idea of translating a plant-based food into the hospitality sector is something that is timely and is a great conversation. And so I'd be thrilled to invite and have the other two panelists come on board, Dane Blom from the Citizen Hotel and Kirsten Dixon from the Within the Wild Adventure Company in Alaska. And welcome both of you, and maybe just a quick kind of overview on your role and your part of the business. Maybe start with you, Kirsten.
Okay, Brad, excellent pronunciation of my name.
Working on that.
Yeah. So I live in Alaska, and I've lived in the backcountry of Alaska, so roadless accessibility for the past 40 years. During my entire adult life, my husband and I have had wilderness lodges, and we've had several iterations of lodges along the way, but they've all been remote and in wilderness areas, off-grid. And at present, we have two properties. One is in a mountainous area called Winter Lake Lodge, and the other property is on the ocean, on the Pacific Ocean, called Tutka Bay Lodge. So certainly we've had our challenges with plant-forward cuisine in Alaska forever, but I have plenty to share with you over our next 40 minutes or so.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. And Dane, you're kind of the farthest away in the States from Alaska as you could be. I believe you're in Florida today, right?
I am in Florida today. I'm in Orlando, but home base is Sacramento. So I run a restaurant called Grange Restaurant and Bar in the heart of downtown Sacramento. And when the restaurant was built 12 years ago, it was opened with the thought that it would be a farm to fork centric restaurant. So all produce comes from within about 100 miles of the restaurant. And the focus of the restaurant really is vegetables and seasonality, and hyper seasonality at that. So the menu changes quite a bit based off of what the farmers are growing, and they dictate what our menu looks like. And we love that. And so that's kind of how we start tying in the plant-based food into what we do. We don't cut out, we're not trying to cut out the protein, but we're trying to highlight the farmers that are growing this fantastic produce for us. And East Sacramento is some of the most fertile growing land that side of the Mississippi. So we really get, it's called America's farm to fork capital for a reason. And so we really get to see some of the best produce around.
That's fantastic. And again, I'm Brad Nelson. I'm the Vice President Culinary and Global Corporate Chef for Marriott International. And, I think from the three of us, you've got three incredibly diverse subsects of the business. And I will say that, as we're doing this conference here in hopefully the final innings of COVID, this has been quite a year. It's been quite a year for all of us, I'm sure individually. It's been quite a year for the industry, and I'm sure it's been quite a year for all of you out in the audience today. And I think as we look at the impact of what's happened throughout our industry, and as I think about, at one point we had well over 3,000 hotels were closed, and quite honestly, we're still a long way from being back open. We've got some areas. China came back early, and Middle East came back early, but the U.S. and Canada and Europe is still struggling. And so any time that I think we as an industry go through these kinds of things, there are seismic shifts. And unfortunately, I've been around a few of these, from 9/11 to the global financial crisis, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, even back to, the early savings and loan crisis that shifted and changed our business. And as we are kind of building back, and as customers are coming back and dying to travel and wanting to get back out, one of the things that I think that we are seeing, at least from the hotel perspective, is that there's an expectation they're going to come back, that things aren't going to be that different, but there's also an expectation that things will be different, not only in menu, but also in experience and story. And so what I'd love to kind of just chat about with the panelists here is, how do you think, COVID and people getting back out and traveling, how do you think that is kind of changing or accelerating this emphasis on plants? What are you doing in your locations that might be reflective of that? Or is it something that now is kind of the time that people will really embrace what we've always supported? So just curious to know what your thoughts are on how COVID has impacted the focus around menu selections and plants specifically. Maybe Dane, start with you.
Yeah, I mean, so COVID has tremendously affected. I have a 200-room boutique hotel above me. And back in April, we went down to about 2% occupancy. We never shut our doors. We drew a line in the sand and just said we're going to keep the doors open the whole time. But what has happened through that is a lot of these farmers that we support with our restaurant, they've had to go elsewhere to find income as well. It's not just all the food and beverage employees I laid off. It all trickles down to the farmers, to the meat purveyors, to everybody. And it's been really interesting. And they're all kind of chomping at the bit to come back. And, they shoot me a text or call me a lot of times just to check in and see where we're at. And business travel, like I see it, I'm in a downtown setting and I'm about a block from the state capitol. And, it's starting to come back. It's slow, but it is coming back. And obviously California is one of the most shut down states in the country, but it's good to see people starting to come back and bring that travel back and be a little less weary of traveling, and also asking where they should go eat when they're in town. People want to go out to eat right now. And so it's nice to see that people are willing to support local restaurants and asking where they should go enjoy a bite to eat. Right now, my restaurant is shut, and it will be, hopefully we'll be open in the next couple of weeks, but it's nice to see people back doing that.
And Kirsten, I'm sure when people come to your place, they're not asking about local restaurants to go eat because you're it, right? They're coming just for that. But you've got a unique set of challenges, and maybe kind of the same question, but how is that kind of impacting your menu selection and what you're choosing to grow?
So in our business model, we're so tiny. We only have 6 guest cabins at each of our 2 lodges, and we really don't want to grow bigger. And I know some, people could scratch their head with the ROI of that, but it's part of our sustainability story. We don't want to impact the natural world that's around these places. And so we bring people into rarefied natural world experiences, and staying small is part of all of that. Now, even with only having 6 guest cabins at each of our lodges, we have 4 people cooking in the kitchen at both places, as crazy as that sounds. And so our cuisine really, in a change from COVID, the beginning of COVID, we've really thought a lot more about sort of honesty and truth in sourcing our cuisine, where our primal products coming from. We've thought a lot about boosting immunity. People have been concerned about their health. Of course, everybody on the planet's concerned about their health right now. So we've really looked at our talents of healing through food. So we have at our breakfast tables at both lodges, we have a whole variety of small plates that guests can select from. And we include miso soup at breakfast. We include seaweed dishes. We include salmon bacon, which is just like cold smoked salmon, just baked or sautéed, that tastes quite a bit like pork bacon. And so we're just thinking about smoothies galore, all sorts of smoothies. So we're thinking about ways that we can really integrate a sense of comfort for people. Okay, if they drink a smoothie on vacation, is that going to heal them? Maybe not, but it's going to give them a sense of hope for the future. We're also, we've also gone into a deep dive into our own greenhouses. We have large greenhouses and small greenhouses. In the small greenhouses, we grow microgreens and other little things. And then the big greenhouses, we grow, veggies and fruits. But we're doing a deep dive into, what seeds are we buying? Are these seeds, are they organic seeds that haven't had pesticide introduction or GMO alterations? And just how to be more sustainable, more earth friendly, I think, really. And that does translate to our food, although we want to make our food approachable to any guest, and we have guests from all over the world stay with us, so we don't want to have our cuisine be so narrowed that it doesn't appeal to a wide swath of people. But definitely health, nutrition, safety, comfort, hope for the future. I think those are all messages in our food.
Couldn't agree more. And I think, and also just to kind of follow up a little bit on what Dane had said about the impact to the supply chain and specifically the farmers. I think that is one of the areas that we are most concerned about, at least, from the hotel segment as well. It's really critical that our hotels, have the ability to kind of connect, support the communities in which they live, and the farmers, the farmers are the ones that are really the most important group that are also at the most risk. It's, fishing, I guess you can stop fishing and the fish are still there. You can come back and get them when the demand is. In farming, you plant a seed and that seed takes 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks to mature, and you need to have the market for it ready to take it when it matures. And I think that's one of the things that, as we talk about plants, and we talk about menu, and we talk about how we actually plan for plants and menus, one of the challenges always is, what's going to be ready. And I think, Dane, you had actually in our earlier conversation, you had kind of talked about how you work with farmers based on what they have when they have it, rather than plan ahead. Can you talk a little bit about how you plan menus around the farmer versus around your own creative insight?
Yeah, well, it's a couple things. The farmer dictates what our menu is. So the farmers will approach us every season and say, we're going this, that, and the other. And sometimes it's only one row of something. And I'll buy the whole row. But once that's gone, there's nothing left. So at the restaurant, you'll see the menu changing 2 to 3 times a week. Not the full menu; it's a continuously evolving thing. And it's the farmers are planning what they think is cool, what they think the guests might enjoy, and you'll see me walking in the farmer's market on Wednesdays across the street with a cart full of produce that maybe they just brought out of a whim. They were maybe just growing for themselves and they decided to bring a little bit, and we'll show up on the menu for just a quick little blurb. And it's great for the farmers because they get to grow what they're passionate about. But as a chef, it's really great for us because we get to change the menu and be as creative as we possibly can be with maybe something that we've never had. And you try it and you're like, oh, this is really cool. This has to wind up on my menu. And so the farmers are really telling us what the menu should look like and, you know, what the hyper seasonality really is. And Sacramento, luckily we have that luxury. You know, all summer long, it's just everything's going in and out and just changing so much. And it's really great for us to put, you know, the best foot forward. And I know a lot of people say this, but tomato season, you know, it's like these tomatoes are coming in hot off the farm, and there really is nothing better than a fresh tomato that's still warm from the sun with a little sea salt and olive oil, you know. And it's cliche, but it's the truth. And sometimes we're putting things like that on the menu just because it's the best, you know. And so we are letting farmers really dictate how we grow, and through that we build relationships. And you know, maybe they see we'll buy a whole row of something, and so the next year they'll plant 3 or 4 rows, and you know, it can maybe be on the menu that much longer. And so they really want to please us as well. But you know, it's fun for them to research and try to find some cool heirloom varieties of something and plant it, and you know, next thing you know, it's on our menu for 3 days and it's gone. And, you know, I think my restaurant, we have a lot of people that stay with us in the hotel side, and they'll eat with us 2, 3, 4 times while they're staying with us. And the idea is that they have a different meal every single time they come in the restaurant. And they're not ordering the same thing over and over. We don't want them to. We want the produce to change that menu as much as possible.
Fascinating. So really, your farmers are writing your menus.
They are.
So in advance. That's fascinating.
They are.
Kirsten, I love Alaska. You know, I grew up in Seattle personally, and I think Alaska is the place. I've been there a number of times, but I love the state, love the people, love the food. But I think of Alaska as, you know, the place where you catch the biggest salmon. And, you know, one bucket list for me is to catch a halibut the size of a door. Not done that yet. But it's very protein centric. And I think of the hunting and moose and all that. How do you balance protein, and where does protein sit in the hierarchy of your menu planning in a destination like Alaska that is so seemingly protein centric?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of young people that have come to Alaska or have been born here and have started small farms all over Alaska. And so the produce and fruit potential here is so much better than it was 20, 30 years ago. The reality is that produce and fruits have always been precious and valued in Alaska. Even when the very first monastery monks came over from Russia in the 1700s, they brought bags of seeds with them to grow gardens. And so, of course, we, unlike Dane, we only have a 4-month essentially growing season in Alaska, and the sun doesn't go down in most places, so it's intense, and not everything can be grown in endless sun. And then we have 7 months of, you know, relative darkness and cold, and so we have to balance that. We do a lot of root cellaring, canning, preserving, putting food by, and just treating produce as being very, very special. I think that many people have come to the conclusion that as our styles and palates change, that it's quite appropriate to have a center of the plate dish be more vegetable centric or more plant centric, and then have the star of the show, perhaps halibut, be an accent, and that doesn't diminish the fact that we have an abundance of, moose and caribou and salmon. We definitely have access to more primal protein in the wild than we do, natural indigenous plants. But I think that things have changed, and by the will of young people living here too, and so our access is so much better.
That's great to hear. And, I think what you are kind of explaining also holds true in many other places of the world as well. A lot of places where we have hotels, it's a very vegetable forward culture, and oftentimes culturally, but also oftentimes economically. But as we see, even as the economics change, it doesn't necessarily mean that we go right to 24-ounce porterhouses. There's still this focus on balance, on health, on plants. And I find that really encouraging. That's not true everywhere necessarily, but it certainly is changing around the world. We've got a couple of questions that came in on the QA, and let me just get to that because I do want to leave time at the end for more questions, but I also want to answer a few that are coming in. And let me just read. We've got two here. The first one is there a discussion, I guess this is for me, for Marriott growing its own supply of vegetables and fruits, and then a follow-up on about this concern about not only what is ready, but where is the supply going to come for the demand of plants with everybody going plant forward. So I guess I'll take that really quickly. That's probably a whole other session to answer those two questions. But in terms of growing closer to property, the answer is yes. We have well over, I think the last count was 300 or so hotels with gardens, all the way from a couple of them that have farms. We've got a hotel in the Philippines that literally has, I think, about 30 acres that's farmed just for them. And we've got a resort down in Orlando, our JW and Ritz-Carlton, that literally has a farm and a restaurant that's supported from that farm. But on top of that, we've got rooftop gardens and bees everywhere, and hydroponics in the hotel. So the answer to the question is yes, we are trying to grow more. And that's part of the question on the supply chain. I think as we go forward, the amount of food for the world is going to continue to be challenged. And this idea of kind of getting closer to production and closer to what's in season and what's ready is the way that, as Dane has explained, as well as Kirsten is doing. Kirsten, sorry, I knew I was going to do that. As Kirsten is doing, with your own high tunnels there growing on site. So I think all of us collectively are working on ways to bring the supply closer to its final use and closer to the property. Hopefully that answers your question, Dimitra. One other follow-up on that, and that is really this notion of local. And local is critical in many ways, and we talk about a distance or a mile's distance to hotels, and I think, Dane, you had a perspective on how closely you want to source, but then I also want to come back to Kirsten. I'm going to do this the whole call, and talk about your perspective on local food and the local influence of the culinarians that are working there. So maybe, Dane, tell us a little about what you consider to be local for your supply source.
Yeah, so I think I said, but we try to source all produce from within about 100 miles of the restaurant. And I've said this before, but we're just very fortunate with what surrounds us. But the bigger picture is that when you do that, you're eating a peach that's in season and it's the best peach you've ever had, or you're eating a tomato that's in season and it's the best you can possibly have in that area, or whatever it may be. We have tons of apple orchards up here, and or in Sacramento, I say up here, I'm in Orlando. But, it's like eat apples when they're in season. And, not only are you supporting really good people, but they want to grow the best and they want to put their best foot forward. And you get to support good people, but you also, in return, you get a product that is just much better than anything that's coming off of a big rig that's backing up to your back door and opening it up and just, bringing in just the cases of whatever from halfway across the world. It's not very sustainable, and it's also, they're picking it all super early just to make sure that it can be transported that far. And I don't want to eat that kind of food, and neither does my guest. And so it's really nice to just eat something at the peak of the season. And the farmers are proud of that. So I think our philosophy of buying everything from within 100 miles makes a lot of sense for our restaurant and our guests. And when the guests are eating in the restaurant, we list, farms on the menu, and they're asking about the farm and, when did you get this stuff in? And it's important to the guests too. They feel like they're spending their money wisely because they're getting it from people that care. And so I just think it's just this big roundabout of people do care about where their food comes from, and they're trying to break that cycle of just going to the grocery store and picking up junk. And you see all the farmers markets just popping up everywhere. They're just swamped. So it's good.
I think COVID has actually brought people closer to food because they're cooking it and they're making it and they're understanding and seeing the differences. And that might be one of the outcomes.
Well,
there is a question. Sorry.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
There's a question in the chat box for Kirsten, and it's by one of our good friends, Mr. Drescher. But Kirsten,
Hi, Greg.
can you see the question there? Do you want to take that?
Yeah, so if I tried to source all our food in a 100-mile radius, right now, for example, there's nothing but snow. I mean, maybe a few rabbits and some, there's not much, right? There's just not much there. And so the way we approach our cuisine, we absolutely, we only use Alaska seafood, and even seafood, we're very cautious and very concerned about ocean safety and ocean health, and we're quite involved in ocean politics in Alaska. So we're not wanton with anything, but we only use Alaska seafood. We only use Alaska primal products, beef and pork, that we purchase whole, and then we either butcher or we have the farms butcher for us. In terms of produce and other things, we work with, we grow a lot of our own, but we also work with farmers, and then we also commit a certain amount of budget for farmer markets so we can share out a little bit. And we have an employee on our staff called our expediter, but he sources things all over Alaska, such as reindeer, caribou, amazing things that he can find that aren't so easy to track down. In the winter time or in the fall time, as we begin to leave the abundance of summer, we definitely are spending weeks canning, preserving, pickling. We do a lot of fermentation of a lot of things. We have root cellars where we store our root cellar at Winter Lake Lodge, for example, will stay right around 50 degrees all year round, which is pretty darn amazing. So I think we lean into those sort of old ways a little bit in terms of preservation. As far as we define Alaska cuisine, we do look to history and we look to geography. We do serve a lot of food that's sort of Russian influenced, Pacific Ocean influenced. Certainly, Alaska's the closest place to Asia, China, and Japan, and we share a lot of techniques and inspiration from those cuisines. We do make our own kimchi, and kimchi is kind of something that cabbage grows really well in Alaska. Kimchi is something you can kind of dress up or down, and you can change flavors, and it can be, something that can be, we have a summer kimchi and we have a winter kimchi, and we do a lot of chutneys and jams. We make rhubarb chutney for the whole year because we never want to be without a little rhubarb chutney that goes onto our salmon, for example. So all of those preservation techniques and I guess sort of ethos of our cuisine doesn't mean that we can't really get great heirloom corn from Mexico to grind to make tortillas, right? Because we have a Hispanic chef on our staff. That makes a lot of sense for us. So I just ask the team, if you want to bring in something from your food memory or your food palette or something that, Alaska really, it doesn't, really, it's not necessarily pioneer food or gold miner food or whatever. Let's make it make sense and have a story behind it and reasoning and meaning and have, some purpose in it being on our plates. And so that's what I task them with, is to really think about how does bringing in this particular food from far away make sense to our table, and let's just make it mean something.
Love that. Love that everything has a story and a meaning and a purpose and an ethos. And I think that makes food that is much more meaningful and much more special to the guest and to those preparing it. That's really important. There's a question that just came in around local purchasing with extremely high volume venues. So I'll take that. I think the key thing I think with that is that we have to think differently. So in high volume venues, you're really talking about banquet venues for the most part. It's really easy to have a leisure focused strategy or a leisure guest strategy around fresh vegetables and frequently changing menus and whatnot. And even in the smaller hotels, it's easier. It's not something that I would say we successfully execute in every location, but it's something we're highly focused on. But in high volume locations, and particularly those in catering and banquets, which, boy, we hope that's going to come back, and it will eventually, because we all need, I always say I'd rather have 1,000 people checking into a hotel with one group for 3 days than 500 couples. A little easier to serve and a little easier to make money on. But in terms of high volume, whether university or because I see this is from university, the question, but it really is two things. One, it is rethinking how you actually plan menus and plan in more flexibility. But to a sense, what seasonality is going to be and what types of things are going to come in. And so you can actually work through plans in advance to say, okay, when this particular set of product is ready, when beets and turnips and kale and carrots or May strawberries, when these are coming in, these are the things we want to use and serve, and this is how we're going to put it into our plan. We know that in many of these high volume locations, particularly in universities or schools, there's a cycle menu, and you get stuck on that cycle, and it becomes, okay, this week we're going to use asparagus, the next week we're going to use broccoli, the next week whatever. To be able to actually open that up and say, okay, we are going to put in a 500 portion vegetable preparation of the seasonal produce that's in season right now. That's the way to look at it. It's the same thing even in catering when we are doing taste panels months in advance. And so often I'll see somebody doing a taste panel in May and they're using asparagus, but that's actually for November. And I'm saying, why in the world would you put asparagus on a menu in November? And you have to think differently and think about when that is going to be served and when it's going to be ready. And so the answer to the question really is to put a strategy around menu planning around seasonality and availability, rather than just locking into cycles of product that you think is going to be just available to buy. And that really is the difference. I think it's kind of going back to that farmer, back to that environmental condition that allows for that product to be at its best in season, and incidentally, when things are in season and in abundance, is actually when they're the most affordable. So it's also a good business decision to be serving products, particularly produce and vegetables, that are in season and or that have been preserved when they're at their peak. So hopefully that answers that question. We've got about 5 minutes. I'd love to continue taking questions, and I guess as they're coming in, maybe we'll just read through them and kick them to whoever wants to answer it. But here's another question. A few years back, Steve Case was an early investor in sweet greens, the challenge of connecting local farms. What are your thoughts on using kind of technology in the high volume unit around local farms? I think it's kind of the same question, but maybe, I don't know, Dane, you want to take a run at that?
I don't know. All these farmers, they're back in the Stone Age. I don't know how you do that. It's not. I just don't think it's an easy thing to connect technology to what they're doing. Go ahead.
I think it's an interesting. You're right in some ways. I think though that could there be and Steve Case thinks there can, and I think he is right. But it is a shift as well in how they produce around managing it from a technology standpoint. So I'm not sure that I can answer that question either. Kirsten.
So it's a small volume. So this isn't high volume issue, but in communities all over Alaska, small farmers have joined together to create a portal where individuals or companies can go to see what they actually have for sale, and individuals can purchase on that portal. So the value of that is that perhaps we would never know that a little farm up on the hill has really incredible chicken eggs for sale. They would be centralized onto this portal. So that can happen in upscaled ways.
So kind of a high-tech co-op, which is great. I've seen those as well. I've seen systems like that as North Carolina, for example, and Charlotte has a similar thing. That's a good point. Good answer. Yes. Patty, are we done? Are you shutting us down here?
I'm popping up to almost shut you down. I'm actually going to ask everyone to stay tuned because I'm going to ask the presenters to share their thoughts on this session in one sentence, but I just want to share a little bit of information about a break that we're going to go to. Which is it is sponsored by the Mushroom Council. And on our left-hand side, we have coming up in sessions 2 special culinary demonstrations, as well as Roxana Julipat and Kirsten Dixon in the sessions for Meet the Author conversations. We also have a networking opportunity where you can be paired with someone randomly for a 4-minute chat. And today's topic is, if you could go anywhere for dinner tonight, where would that be? And we also have our innovation hubs, where you can see culinary demonstrations, insightful presentations, and plant-forward innovation inspiration from our generous sponsors. So enjoy the networking opportunities, but I'm going to start by asking Kirsten for your top takeaway from this session in one sentence.
Well, I think that, anywhere on the planet, we can consider a plant forward cuisine, even in the wilds of Alaska.
Great. And Dane?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we as a nation need to buy local and support local. It's just going to help with plant-based, plant-centric food tremendously.
And taste.
And taste.
And taste. And Brad?
Yeah, I think my takeaway is that plant forward is more than vegetarianism. It really is a business and economic model that makes sense not only for the world, the country, but also for our businesses, in that it provides more flexibility, provides better sustainment of our local communities and those supporting it, and as a better and more balanced approach to menu development and menu offerings. So that's really my takeaway. Is there's a lot to this, and we should be doubling down.
There is a lot to it. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for a very inspiring and informative session. And we will look forward to you maybe joining us in networking or one of the sessions. But thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Kirsten, we'll see you over at the Author Connections.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye-bye,
Thank you.
everyone.